Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the revised, juiced up, and uncensored version of Return of Hua Sect. That's right, the tale you know and love, but with extra spice and zero punches pulled. This time, we're picking up after the Southern Edge sect got served a whooping they won't soon forget. It's 2 years later, and Hua's finest are about to step into a brand new adventure. Our boy's grown, his seniors are even cockier, and somehow, everyone's hair still looks fabulous after all this training. But don't get it twisted, this ain't your average trip out of the sect. There's bound to be more swords swinging than a wild Friday night, and you just know someone's gonna get roasted harder than your last Tinder date. So grab your snacks, sit back, and let's dive into this next chapter where the stakes are high, the jokes are dirty, and the battles, well, they're damn legendary. Episode 111. It is enough that you are a disciple of Mount Hua. The snow flowers and plum blossoms that filled the world faded away, like a fantasy gone wrong. Those who witnessed this sight stood in stunned silence, lost in the afterglow, unable to escape the lingering imagery of that majestic sight. As the dreamlike visions faded, two people were left standing in their place. Just two. Chung Myung and Jin Gem Ryung. Everyone observed the two with bated breath, thinking, what the heck just happened? Who won? Did we finally manage to knock the Southern Edge sect off their high horse? Most people didn't notice what happened during the fight. They only saw a flurry of white snowflowers and red plum blossoms. You know, like a romantic drama gone rogue. But soon, they would be able to clearly see the results they were looking for. Jin Jumryong appeared to be standing tall, but soon his knees began to tremble like jelly at an all-you-can-eat buffet. In a world where time had stopped, only Jin Gumryong seemed to move. His knees bent to the floor, and his body crumbled like last week's leftovers. Thud! The sound of his body hitting the floor broke the stifling silence, kind of like when your friend tries to sneak in a midnight snack but trips over a chair. Baek Chun looked at the fallen Jin Gumryong with his eyes wide open. His mind screaming, Jin Gumryong has... A wall that Baek Chun could never overcome had been defeated and lay collapsed on the ground. Was Jin Gumryong weak? Nah, that was not the case. This dude's strength had far exceeded Baek Chun's expectations. He understood why Jin Gumryong was so proud and confident. If they had battled 1,000 times, Baek Chun would still never defeat him. But now that same guy was lying on the floor like a broken toy. Baek Chun's gaze shifted to the side. Chung Myung was looking at Jin Gumryong with his sword lowered. It was not just Baek Chun. Everyone was looking at Chung Myung like he was a new flavor of ice cream. There was a slight unease, and a sense of excitement that arose from the bottom of the heart, like finding an extra fry at the bottom of the bag. Everyone was naturally aware of what this meant. The scene they had just witnessed would probably be spoken about forever, like your uncle's fish story. As long as Mount Hua and the Southern Edge sect continue to exist, the story of what happened today would live on through the mouths of the public, along with the names of the Southern Edge sect and Mount Hua. In other words, a legend was born here today. We won. Yoon Jong mumbled without realizing it, still trying to wrap his head around what he just saw. He couldn't believe it despite seeing it with his own eyes. 10 wins in a row. Mount Hua's third-class disciple, Chung Myung, defeated the Southern Edge sect's second-class disciples 10 times. He even faced off against their strongest disciple, Jin Gum Ryong. Many thoughts complicated Yoon Jong's mind, and nothing seemed to make sense, like trying to read a manual for a toaster while half asleep. All he could do was groan and stare at Chung Myung. Shh! Chung Myung finally sheathed his sword at his waist and looked around. Those who met his eyes flinched and stepped back, as if he was about to reveal the world's most embarrassing secret. And his lips formed into a smile, and he slowly said, "This time's Mount Hua Southern Edge Sect Conference." He declared in a voice that was neither too high nor low, like a well-timed punchline. Ends with the victory of Mount Hua. And with that came the reaction. Yoon Jong was startled to see Baek Chun screaming in front of him, as if he just won the lottery. Although Yoon Jong had spent a lot of time together with Baek Chun since entering Mount Hua, he had never seen Baek Chun scream this excitedly. But after thinking about it, it made sense. Yoon Jong was only a third-class disciple. His feelings towards the Southern Edge sect were naturally more shallow than Baekjeon's, like a kiddie pool compared to an Olympic swimming pool. Baekjeon and the second-class disciples had been crushed by the Southern Edge sect for at least a decade longer than the third-class disciples after experiencing many more conferences. As such, Yoonjong's emotions couldn't be compared to Baekjeon's. Even so, Yoonjong felt like he was losing his mind in the excitement, bouncing around like a kid who just found out it was pizza night. The same was true for the other disciples. Wow! We won! We won over the Southern Edge sect! The first victory in all these years! The first! Damned Southern Edge sect! 10 wins! 10 wins! That crazy bastard won 10 straight times! Right. Ha 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 ha. Chung-myung, you brat. They had never won a single fight. Seeing the second-class disciples rejoicing for Chung-myung even more than the third-class disciples, Yoonjong smiled. This is a martial arts sect, he thought, shaking his head in disbelief. People argue with each other, and they may not get along well. However, when matters involving the sect's name occur, all those complicated feelings vanish faster than snacks at a party. Ah, of course. Ah, Sahyung! That crazy bastard won. He beat Jin Jem Ryong. Wah! That didn't mean that the third-class disciples were any less happy. Jo-gul, who was next to him, grabbed Yoonjong's head and began to shake him with a force that could break his neck. He seemed to completely lose his mind, his excitement spilling over like soda from a shaken can. Hey, let go of... Ah, this is crazy! Crazy, I say! 10 wins! I knew he wasn't a human, but oh my god, 10 wins! That crazy bastard, haha! He is seriously insane! Let go of me, you idiot! Even as Yoonjong screamed, he couldn't erase the smile covering his face. Jo-gul, who was shaking Yoonjong's head, nearly began to rip his hair out. Yet they couldn't help themselves. A sense of joy and satisfaction was rising from their hearts like fresh bread out of the oven. Had they ever felt like this in their lives? Chung-myung, you did well, you punk. Yoonjong looked at Chung-myung, who was still standing in the center like he was posing for a magazine. Chung-myung raised his hand and pressed hard against his chest. Then he gulped down a rush of blood that was seeking to escape from his mouth, reminding everyone that even legends can have bad days. I overdid it. The difference between what Chung-myung was capable of and what his body could handle was still as extreme as ever. It was good to overpower Jin Gom-ryong with the Seven Sages' sword, but he suffered several internal injuries in the process, like the aftermath of a wild party. But this should be fine. He can handle this much internal damage. It's not like he was out there breaking records or anything. In the past, he was the Plum Blossom Sword Saint and lived as an object of fear and respect to others. But had he ever done something like this in his life? I didn't sever the heavenly demon's head alone, he thought, chuckling. Everyone knew the name of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint and his role in history. However, there weren't many achievements of his own that people could discuss, especially not when he was as young as Chung-myung is now. But this battle today would be remembered and spoken about for a long time and follow Chung-myung throughout his new life in Manhwa. Am I proud? No. It's bittersweet. Chung-myung lifted his head and looked at the Southern Edge sect. Seeing the disciples all dazed and mesmerized, something bloomed within him, like a flower after a long winter. When life is this good, even plain rice would taste sweet. A cold glint flitted through Chung-myung's eyes as he smiled and looked at the Southern Edge sect, who were clearly trying to recover from the shock. A victory that could be seen on the surface was important, but what mattered to Chung-myung was that they had been ensnared by his hidden intentions. It was certain from how the disciples appeared to be lost and in a daze. They had understood. They will never be able to forget what happened here. This was going to be firmly imprinted in their memories, like that one embarrassing dance move you can't shake off. Thinking about how this would impact them in the future, they would surely struggle for the next decade to overcome this trauma. You should have never touched us. Losing the present is a great crisis, but losing the future results in a complete collapse. Today, Chung-myung stole the Southern Edge sect's future, and that's gotta sting. How is that? Sayoung! My Sayoung! Can't this be called an act of perfect revenge? Chung-myung couldn't help but feel giddy as he basked in the moment. Revenge might be a dish best served cold, but he preferred his hot and spicy, just like the thrill of victory. Are you really a Taoist? He felt like bursting into laughter. Seriously? A Taoist with enemies? He almost considered it an oxymoron, like a cat who likes water, an absolute fantasy. But let's not kid ourselves. When it came to his Sayong, Chung Myung knew he wouldn't hear the end of it if he let this slip. Still, in this particular moment, he found solace in knowing that his Sayong wasn't around to lecture him about the virtues of kindness and mercy. If he had been there, he would have reminded Chung Myung that the current disciples of the Southern Edge sect were innocent. But who cared about their innocence right now? This was about glory, about settling scores. But the debt hasn't been paid in full. His eyes scanned the Southern Edge sect's disciples, who looked like they'd just seen a ghost. In this moment of sheer delight, Chung Myung thought, "Ah, yes! This is what I live for!" As long as both sects were breathing and kicking, he'd keep the vendetta alive. Just a bit of playful torment to keep things interesting, right? But for now, this victory would suffice. He'd take a moment to relish the sweetness of it all. The contrasting atmosphere around them was palpable. On one side, joy and jubilation erupted like a fireworks show, while on the other, the Southern Edge sect looked like they'd just received an invitation to a funeral instead of a martial arts competition. Sasak! A voice snapped him out of his victory reverie. Ha! Ha! Un-Am, still looking as dazed as someone who just woke up from a 3-year nap, blinked back to reality. He looked around, taking in the wild celebration, and it hit him. How am I supposed to do this? Well, if he didn't do it, who else would? Un-Am tightened his fists, gathering his resolve. After all, the world needed a celebratory voice, and who better than the guy standing next to Chung Myung? This Manhwa and Southern Edge sect conference ends in the victory of Manhwa. His voice boomed, sending the cheers soaring even higher, almost shattering the heavens. The noise was deafening, with disciples hugging each other as if they were long-lost lovers reunited after years apart. Ch-ch, without any sense of shame. Chung Myung chuckled at the pure chaos surrounding him. The Southern Edge sect's fallen champion lay there, while his disciples scrambled to revive him, looking like a comedy troupe in a slapstick routine. Take him back. They were so shocked that they looked as if someone had told them they were getting a surprise exam. Get yourselves together. As Chung Myung watched them rush to collect their fallen comrade, he felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him. Their leader had been utterly wrecked by his disciple. It was poetic in a way, like a tragicomedy that would go down in history. Sayang, Sayang, come to your senses! To the treatment room, move! Chung Myung shook his head, fighting a grin. You guys might want to check for brain injuries while you're at it. As the Southern Edge sect scurried about like headless chickens, Chung Myung turned away, ready to bask in the afterglow of his hard-fought victory. But wait, he wasn't out of the woods yet. Oh my God. Suddenly, he was swarmed by the Mount Hua disciples, who were bouncing around him like hyperactive children who just discovered candy. Ah! Chung Myung! You idiot! You crazy bastard! No. Well, such men are needed, seriously. The onslaught of praise and affection hit him like a tidal wave. Chung Myung felt like he was being crushed under the weight of 1,000 enthusiastic fans. Ack! My body! You idiots! My body! He barely got the words out before his fellow disciples continued their frenzy, shaking him as if he were a maraca in a salsa band. Ah! Crazy! Insane! My body! You bastards! In a moment of chaos, Chung Myung finally wriggled free from their clutches. He staggered back, feeling like he'd taken more damage from their celebratory antics than from the fight itself. I don't feel so bad. As he stood there, he couldn't help but smile. It was a foreign feeling, this appreciation. Back in the day, he'd saved Mount Hua countless times, but the gratitude had often felt obligatory, like being handed a participation trophy for just showing up. But now, this was genuine. Today's event had shaken the foundations of Mount Hua. The once feared Southern Edge sect was now left picking up the pieces, and the pride of the Mount Hua disciples was rekindled. Sayong, is this good? You did well, Chung Myung. Getting a compliment from his Sayong was a rarity, and the thought alone swelled his heart with pride. He turned his gaze back to the jubilant crowd, where the echoes of victory still reverberated. In the end, He'd not only won a fight, but reignited a spark within his fellow disciples that would burn brightly for years to come. And who knew? Maybe one day they'd thank him for this crazy, chaotic ride. But for now, he was just happy to bask in the glow of triumph and the wild, wonderful insanity of it all. Episode 112. It is enough that you are a disciple of Manhwa too. Huh. Ah. Hoo-ha! Hyun-sang was breathing heavily as a strange windy sound leaked from his mouth. This, ha-ha-ha! There was nothing he could say. It took all his effort not to burst into laughter. The victory was a great pleasure, but it wasn't appropriate to express it openly since the opponent had suffered horribly. If I was a first-class disciple, I would have run over there by now. This was the first time Hyun-sang felt so heavily burdened by being an elder. We really beat them. To be precise, Chungmyeong had won, not Mount Hua. But who cares? Hyun-sang's only regret was that he couldn't join the children in celebrating because of his dignity as an elder. Ooh-ha-ha! We won! We won! Did you see that, Sahyung? Chungmyeong raised our wealth again. Raised the sect's name, is that what you meant? Didn't I say that? Ha-ha! Where did that golden pig even roll in from? Ha-ha! Sajai, think of your words. To shit with that. Why should I care about dignity in this situation? This is the first victory I've had to celebrate since I entered this damned Mount Hua. Let's calm down. Ha ha ha. Look at the faces of those Southern Edge bastards. It pissed me off every time I had to watch them leave so triumphantly. Ugh, I couldn't even eat. Their whole journey home is going to be hell. Ha! Hyun-sang gave up trying to control Han-young and smiled. He's right. Who cares about decency right now? What good ever came to Mount Hua when they kept up their appearances and stayed polite? All they received was applause for being well-mannered and polite, something you only get at a tea party with your grandma. Kuhahaha! Sect leader! Did you see? That Chungmyeong, sect leader? Hyun-young, who ran to Hyun-jong, flinched the moment he saw the gentle expression on Hyun-jong's face. Everything has been achieved. No, this idiot keeps trying to pass out anytime something good happens. Come to your senses, Sahyung. Hyun-jong shook his head. I feel like my soul escaped for a bit. Wait, that's not important now. This wasn't a dream? There's no dream that's as absurd as this. Think that? Right, you're right. Hyun-jong looked at Chungmyeong with a proud smile. Chungmyeong, who was surrounded by other disciples, appeared to be screaming and scolding them for their harassment, but all the Sahyungs were embracing him regardless. This is it. How long had it been since the disciples of Mount Hua gathered and rejoiced? Han-jong was more satisfied to see the disciples so happy than he was at the fact that they defeated the Southern Edge sect. Sect leader? Eunjeom approached him with a brilliant smile. The joy is indescribable, but why don't we end this now? It wouldn't be good to keep making the Southern Edge sect watch this. I suppose so. Hyun-jong smiled and looked at Eunjeom. Did you know this would happen? I didn't expect this much, but, Eunjeom looked at Chungmyeong and said, I expected that kid to raise the name of Mount Hua. You have high hopes for him. Right, he's someone that exceeds all expectations in many ways, especially when it comes to being a pain in the ass. All right, I see. It was true that there were many doubts surrounding Chungmyeong, but what did that matter right now? We should go. Let them be. We need to greet the other side. Han-young quickly jumped to help out as well. Shouldn't you bring them some gifts? That way, they'll be sure to spread this story, Sahyung. Let's open our wallets. We have some money left, so let's use it. We need to bribe these people into complimenting Mount Hua, and Hyun-jong sighed and shook his head as Hyun-sang grabbed Hyun-young and dragged him away. Sama-sung kept silent. It was often said that a person driven to the extreme doesn't feel anger. It would seem that was correct. The anger that had dominated Sama-sung's mind before had vanished. In its place, there was merely a hollow feeling of disappointment. Why did it turn out like this? The Southern Edge sect had never been defeated in the conference until now. Of all times, it happened now. At the very last conference, they suffered a devastating defeat that could never be washed clean by future generations. The Southern Edge sect, a member of the 9 great sects and 1 union, lost to a crumbling sect that they sought to destroy. What happened here was unbelievably ridiculous. Why? This was no simple defeat. This defeat would change the flow of power in the surrounding regions. Anyone who knows will regard the Southern Edge sect as a loser in Shanxi. The future of the sect would be unknown. And Samasung looked at the disciples standing in front of him. Some were unconscious, while others were caring for the fallen. However, most just seemed bewildered. As he watched the vitality drain from their eyes, he felt something prick his heart. They will also fear Mount Hua, just like their ancestors did. After the demonic sect's attack, Mount Hua's disciples felt the same despair that the Southern Edge sect felt. They must have also experienced frustration and hopelessness when faced with a wall that could never be overcome. Why? It was all because of him. Samasung's eyes shone. We didn't lose to Mount Hua. They lost to one man. Had it not been for Chung Myung, such an outcome would have been impossible. What the third-class disciples achieved could be written off as an accident. After all, the Southern Edge sect's third-class disciples are younger when compared to Mount Hua's anyway. However, Chung Myung defeating the second-class disciples left no room for excuses. From now on, whenever the Southern Edge sect's name is mentioned, Chung Myung's name will surely follow. What kind of humiliation is this? Shame. A disgrace that will never be repeated. This? Seeing Samasung grinding his teeth, the disciples bowed their heads. This, damn it! Now that he'd realized the situation, his eyes shone with anger and humiliation. His heart began to pound as if it would explode as his eyes turned distant. How do I face the sect leader? The faces of the disciples turned ghostly pale when they heard Samasung's murmuring. In the eyes of Samasung, who was grasping for a way to explain this, he saw the sect leader of Mount Hua approaching. Crunch. He bit his lip enough to make it bleed again. But he couldn't allow his pain to be shown to Mount Hua. They would only mock him further. Samasung controlled his expression and spoke to Hyunjong. Congratulations, sect leader. You did well too. Hyunjong smiled. We were lucky this time. Then we must be out of luck. Samasung's eyes flashed. Hearing Hyunjong's words, he wanted to scream out, but he spoke coldly. You can rejoice as much as you like, sect leader. Isn't victory a rarity for Mount Hua? You never know if this will be the last time you experience it, so you should be happy. Be happy. That... Hun Young was about to yell, but Han Sang quickly pulled him back. Samasung continued to speak as his tone began to shift. I admit that we lost the conference today, but don't forget that Mount Hua didn't win against the Southern Edge sect. Only the third-class disciples won, not the second class. The fact is that you haven't changed a thing. Hyunjong smiled brightly as he listened to Samasung. We think the same too. I am grateful for your comments. I would appreciate it if you could send my regards to the Southern Edge sect's leader. Hearing those words, Samasung's eyes went wide. How dare he say this? Hyunjong didn't even dare to look him in the eye just the other day. But now he was acting so defiantly just because he won once. That moment. Cheap stuff never goes very far. Samasung turned his head. It was a familiar voice now, a voice that he would never forget in this life. Chung Myung approached the elders, along with his Sayungs. Samasung's eyes were bloodshot as his gaze pierced Chung Myung. All because of him. Samasung seemed to be holding back a belly full of raging fire as he glared at Chung Myung. Receiving the elder's gaze, Chung Myung punched Jo Gul, who was standing next to him. Sayung! Cheap stuff! Huh? Cheap! How could you say that? Hey, I'm the Sayung here! So, if you are the Sayung, you should at least try and protect my face. How can you act so rudely? Are you really talking to me right now? Who else? Sayung. Chung Myung kicked Jo Gul once again and turned to Hunjong. Sect leader, the conference is done, so I felt that it would be polite to come and greet the other side. Hoo, I see. Don't be polite to them, you bastard. Seeing that he had the sect leader's permission, Chung Myung shifted his focus to Samasung. With a grin plastered across his face, Chung Myung approached like he was strutting onto a stage, ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. So, you guys good? I mean, you don't look so hot. Maybe it's time to call it a day and go home, huh? Do some deep breathing, maybe meditate on your failures? Samasung's body trembled with barely contained rage. You're really insufferable, you brat. Chung Myung put a hand to his chest, feigning shock. Oh no, did I hurt your feelings? My bad. I didn't realize the Southern Edge sect was so sensitive. Maybe you should invest in some thicker skin. Samasung's face turned a shade of white that could only be described as washed out rice paper. This kid. Chung Myung leaned in closer, a mischievous sparkle in his eye. How about this? You want to take a swing at me? I promise I won't even flinch. It'll be like a practice round for your sect's punching bag. The tension in the air was thicker than a bowl of porridge, and Samasung could feel the scorn radiating off the gathered disciples. They all had that same expression of disbelief mixed with pity, like watching a cat try to fight a dog and knowing it's not going to end well. How dare he challenge me like that? Samasung's thoughts spiraled into chaos. He had been ready to explode with a surprise attack, but now, this little punk was throwing the gauntlet in his face. Chung Myung continued, his confidence oozing. I mean, look at you, all dressed up with nowhere to go. You could just take your defeat like a champ and go home with your tails between your legs, or you could take your shot. It's your call, really. Sama Sung's blood boiled at the implications. The urge to wipe that smug grin off Chung Myung's face was overwhelming. But he knew better than to act rashly. The kid was practically radiating danger now, like a live wire waiting to short circuit. Next time, you won't be so lucky, brat, he muttered, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. Maybe someday it'll be true. Chung Myung winked, spinning on his heel and strutting back to his friends as if he had just delivered the final punchline of a killer stand-up routine. Hyun-jong, watching the exchange, couldn't help but smile, a complex swirl of pride and amusement bubbling up inside him. You've got guts, Chung Myung. Just maybe dial it down a notch next time? Chung Myung puffed out his chest, ready to argue, but then he saw the expressions on the faces of his Sahyungs, full of admiration and exasperation. All right, I'll play nice for now. The atmosphere lightened considerably, the joy of victory flowing through the crowd as they gathered around Chung Myung, all laughter and cheers. It was a scene that had been missing for far too long. Hun Young chimed in. Did you see the look on that guy's face? Priceless. I thought he was going to explode like an overcooked dumpling. The laughter spread like wildfire, and even Hun Sang found it hard to keep a straight face, his earlier restraint dissolving into pure amusement. Who knew defeating the Southern Edge sect would be so entertaining? Hyun Sang chuckled. And just like that, with Chung Myung at the center of their revelry, the disciples of Mount Hua basked in the glow of their hard-earned victory. Determined to savor every single moment. They were back, and they were loud, and no amount of dignified elders could take that away from them now. It is enough that you are a disciple of Mount Hua, 3. The start was grand, but the ending was pretty sloppy, like a poorly executed backflip. You know, the kind where you hit the ground and think, why did I even try? There were several reasons for this disaster. First of all, Mount Hua had never imagined they could win, so they never made any plans to celebrate. Even if they wanted to party, the feeling was more like, did we really just win, or is this some kind of weird dream? Secondly, with Samasung already ghosting them, the disciples from the Southern Edge sect had to skedaddle out of Mount Hua faster than a cat on a hot tin roof. Finally, sect leader, can we talk for a moment? Don't push. Didn't I come here first? Sect leader, wait for a second. Sect leader. As soon as Samasung left, the officials of Shanxi, who had witnessed the chaos, rushed for Hunjong. They had set their sights on Mount Hua's potential like it was the last piece of cake at a party. And they couldn't just leave empty-handed. I need to make a deal. I need to secure some business with them. We can't let the Yuna Guild soak up all the profits. Sure, Mount Hua may have won the conference, but that didn't mean they had completely overpowered the Southern Edge sect. Still, it was undeniable that Mount Hua was growing stronger at an incredible rate, like a teenager discovering protein shakes. Such is the logic of the world. Where there's power, money flows like a river after a rainstorm. The people of Shanxi had seen the results of the conference for themselves, and they were hoping that the money trickling into Mount Hua could splash down to them too. It's like they thought they could get rich just by standing around looking important. What is wrong with all of you? Hyun Young shouted so loudly that the officials flinched, looking at him like they just got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Did I overdo it? Right. Still, he is a sect leader. I should behave politely. Everyone arrived at once, so he must be flustered. But Han Young kept going, surprising everyone with his unexpected leadership skills. You should be discussing this matter with me, the finance head of the sect. I've prepared refreshments, so please come this way. I will prepare enough time for you all, so we don't need to rush through this. I'll even throw in some pastries. Ah, and I've prepared rooms for you to stay, just in case. If anyone wants to stay, let me know. I promise the pillows are fluffy. As the crowd watched Han Young humming happily as he headed toward the finance office, they realized they were in for a long and probably awkward day of negotiations. Just before all the Southern Edge sect's disciples headed home, Chung Myung found himself face to face with a certain disciple again. Thank you for the guidance. What? Thank you, young disciple. Chung Myung looked at Lee Sung-baek with a stiff expression, like he'd just bitten into a lemon. All your other Sahyungs must be gnashing their teeth right now. Is it all right for you to come and say this to me? Lee Song-baek scratched his head with an awkward smile, looking like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. We're already halfway distant. Halfway? Should he be called optimistic? Or just plain naive? The disciples of the Southern Edge sect were glaring at Lee Song-baek with eyes full of hatred, like he'd just insulted their mothers. It was only natural they'd feel that way. A traitor is always more hated than the enemy. From the Southern Edge sect's point of view, Chung Myung was the big bad wolf. So, how could they think positively of Lee Song-baek when he was out here chatting up the enemy like they were old buddies? Although it seemed like Lee Song-baek didn't care about that at all. Before, I couldn't understand what the young disciple was saying. Lee Song-baek spoke with determined eyes, as if he'd just had an epiphany after staring at a wall for an hour. But now I think I understand what you were trying to tell me and the path I need to take. Hey, I am from Mount Hua, you know? Lee Song-baek smiled brightly, oblivious to the glaring daggers from his fellow disciples. What does it matter which sect you belong to? Anyone can be a teacher as long as you have something to learn and are willing to listen. Kind of like how I learned that I can't dance. Excuse me, you? Huh? Do you want to join our sect? He should just join Mount Hua. He's way more like a Taoist than me. After all, you've already made an enemy of the Southern Edge sect. Lee Song-baek smiled humbly and looked over at Jin Gum Ryong, who was still unconscious and being carried out like an overcooked noodle. Sa-young must have felt a lot from today's match. Be careful. Sa-young is an amazing person. He'll surely train with the young disciple as his goal from now on. He'll become much more powerful and frightening, like a monster in a horror movie. Yes, well, whatever. Seeing Chung Myung's response, Lee Song-baek smiled bitterly, like he'd just been told the truth about Santa Claus. It might be meaningless for you, young disciple. Chung Myung would become stronger much faster than Jin Gum Ryong. As time passed, the gap would only widen, never closing. Lee Song-baek knew that all too well. I just wanted to thank you again. Then, until we meet again? Wait. This time, Chung Myung called for Lee Song-baek, who looked back, raising an eyebrow like he'd just heard an odd noise. Yes? Chung Myung and Lee Song-baek stared at each other without exchanging a word for what seemed like a long time. Then Chung Myung began to speak in a serious tone that made Lee Song-baek rethink his life choices. It will be a difficult road. Lee Song-baek sighed, feeling like he was signing up for a reality show no one wanted to be on. Young disciple really seems to read people's minds. I can't hide anything from you. You'll still stay with them? Lee Song-baek nodded, looking resolute. I didn't choose this path because I wanted to. I need to take this path, so I will follow it. Chung Myung nodded, as if he understood the struggle of being the only sober person at a party. Sure, Chung Myung was struck by a strange emotion as he watched Lee Song-baek return to his fellow disciples, feeling like a spectator at a slow-motion train wreck. Lee Song-baek would probably have to fight a lonely battle from now on. The Southern Edge sect's disciples would never be able to forget Chung Myung's sword and would live with that as their new obsession. It would be difficult to protect the Southern Edge sect's techniques in that environment. People reject those that are different from themselves, especially when they can't even do a decent dance move. It will be a lonely and difficult battle, but If he can do that, maybe he will become the hope of the Southern Edge sect. Chung Myung turned and looked at Mount Hua's third-class disciples, who were busy laughing and joking as if they'd just won the lottery. Seeing Joe Goul and the others smiling, he couldn't help but sigh like a parent watching their kids do something ridiculous. At least one sect seems to be doing well. Why was his sect made of such people? If only Mount Hua had a single person like Lee Song-baek, Chung Myung's job would have been twice as easy, like finding a dollar bill in an old coat. Ugh, Chung Myung shook his head. What could he do? Even if I die, I'm still a man. Humans do their best in a given environment. There's no point in blaming others or being envious of what they have. It's like being jealous of a dog for having a better bed. Chung Myung turned around to watch the Southern Edge sect leave, like a bad breakup. With this, the matter with the Southern Edge sect was concluded. From now on, Chung Myung would no longer take the initiative to strike at the Southern Edge sect. They might not know, but he had already taken enough revenge, like a cat getting back at the dog that stole its food. So, did his relationship with the Southern Edge sect end here? Of course not. Now, for the Southern Edge sect, Chung Myung went far beyond just being a thorn in their side. He had become their #1 enemy, like a bad rash that wouldn't go away. It was understandable. If Chung Myung was the Southern Edge sect's leader, he would do anything to avenge this humiliation. Because that's just how survival works, right? Then they'll get what's coming to them. Chung Myung smiled. Then someone quickly rushed in looking for him. Chung Myung? It was Yoon Jong. What is it, Sa-hyung? Come here. The sect leader is looking for you. Chung Myung didn't feel like going. Again, he raised his head and looked up at the distant sky. I should have held myself back. Actually, the series of events was far from over. After all, didn't Chung Myung take down all of the Southern Edge sect's second-class disciples and make plum blossoms bloom from his sword? Naturally, the elders had no choice but to harbor doubts about him. Until now, the conference had been ongoing, so they couldn't concentrate on him. However, now that the conference had concluded, they were bound to have questions they wanted to be answered. What kind of excuse would work here? Should he say that he's their ancestor? No, he couldn't say that. How about saying that he just happened to pick these techniques up by chance? No, no one would believe that. Ugh. While Chung Myung scratched his head and struggled to devise a way out of this scenario, Yoon Jong just tilted his head in confusion. What are you up to? Come on, let's go. Yes. Chung Myung took a deep breath. Ah, my life. Now, even after winning, he would have to make up some excuses. My Sa-hyung, are you watching? Should I really live like this? Then just die. No, you bastard. You're just saying that because you are dead. In the end, Chung Myung headed to the sect leader's residence, like a cow being led to the slaughterhouse. Given that there were quite a few shoes in front of the room, it seemed like the elders and the first-class disciples had all gathered. Sect leader, I Yoon Jong, brought Chung Myung. Come in. Yes. Yoon Jong beckoned Chung Myung inside. And he beckoned again. What are you doing, brat? Get in. Chung Myung sighed and entered. Now that he was entering, he would have to deal with being questioned. Ooh, Chung Myung! Oh ho! You did well, very well. My Chung Myung did well. What? As soon as he entered, the elders and the first-class disciples waiting for him all applauded. It was strange to see all these men that should be doubting him clap for him. What is wrong with these people? When he looked up, everyone was smiling and full of laughter. Even though they couldn't bloom plum blossoms from their swords, they seemed like they would bloom at any moment from these men's smiling faces. Seeing Hunjong, who was seated in the middle with a smile so wide that it reached both ears, Chung Myung realized one thing. Ah, they never felt this. Seeing the adults of the sect smiling and laughing as if it was nothing important, Chung Myung felt both a bit dreary and emotional at the same time. What was it? It was a bit like a child seeing his father fail to live up to his expectations. Hyun Jong began to speak while trying to calm himself. Right! Chu! Ugh! Right, Chung Myung! Kook! Hyun Jong lowered his head and covered his mouth with his hands. Even the word Chung Myung seemed too good for him to say. Kwah! The old man seemed to cough. However, his face turned red, and it seemed like he was still struggling to hold back his laughter. Right? Are you hurt anywhere? Just a slight cut. The wound might fester. So, after leaving here, go straight to the medical practitioner. Hyunsang spoke with dazzling eyes. Just call the medical practitioner here. Why ask such a busy man to go to them? I feel like that's a bit strange. Who's busy? That child is busy. What work does the practitioner even have to do? Hunjong looked at Hunsang with blank eyes, but he simply puffed up his chest feeling proud, and everyone gathered there nodded their heads as if it was the natural course to take. Then let's do that. Yes. Sect leader? Your Mount Hua's? It was then. Slam! The door burst open as Hun Young sprinted in. Sect leader, money is pouring in. Ha ha ha! A lot of money is rolling in. I've never even heard of a story where we make money without doing anything. That guy is the god of wealth, earning money. Chung Myung, this child, you are here. Hyun Young rushed to Chung Myung and grabbed his cheeks. What a cute child. Ha ha ha! If I had a grandson like you, I wouldn't wish for anything more in the world. Chung Myung, whose cheeks were stretched out, looked like he was going to pass out. My Sayung, look at how I have to live. Now, a child that's too young to even be my grandson is stretching out my cheeks. Huck! Do I really have to live like this, huh? Look at you. You seem quite happy. Oh ha ha! What? Right, I am happy too. Oh ha ha! All the adults in Mount Hua seem to have lost their minds. Episode 114. It is enough that you are a disciple of Mount Hua. 4. Chung Myung looked at Hyunjong's back as they climbed up the mountain. It was like watching an old man try to climb a hill while carrying a bag of bricks. Poor guy. Hyunjong, who had just congratulated Chung Myung, called him over for a private chat. Now, they were making their way up the mountain alone. Just the two of them. Chung Myung's eyes were glued to Hyunjong's back. It was the second time he had been staring at the elder's back like this. The last time was when he witnessed the tragic sight of the sect leader struggling to open the door to the underground warehouse. Seriously, it was like watching a toddler trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube. That back of Hyunjong, carrying the fate of the crumbling Mount Hua, all on his lonesome. That sad back, which was supposed to be hidden from others, remained firmly imprinted in Chung Myung's memory. But today, his back looked a bit less burdened than usual. Either that, or he finally found a decent chiropractor. When Hyunjong finally reached the summit, he looked down at Mount Hua like he was the king surveying his kingdom. Chung Myung also took a look around, taking in the rugged beauty of Mount Hua's mountains. Nice view. I'd snap a selfie if I weren't stuck here with you. Chung Myung. Yes, sect leader? This is the highest peak on Mount Hua. Yes. Did you feel anything when climbing up? This was a random question, so Chung Myung just gave the honest answer that came to mind. It's high. Hyunjong turned to look at Chung Myung, who proudly puffed out his chest like, what? Was that wrong? Hyunjong chuckled, shaking his head. Yes, you're right. Hyunjong's face softened, which was a nice change from the usual stern look. I've called you here because I want to ask you something. Is this where the real talk starts? Chung Myung's face turned grim. He wasn't sure what the question would be, but he knew he needed to avoid being entangled or confused, like trying to navigate a maze blindfolded. Chung Myung. Yes. Sect leader? The plum blossom on your sword. Chung Myung licked his lips. Firstly, thank you. Hyunjong bowed his head towards Chung Myung. At the unexpected action, Chung Myung flinched and took a step back. Why are you doing this, sect leader? This isn't the sect leader speaking. I'm thanking you from one human to another. I've always wanted to see that scene at least once in my life. But my position as the sect leader of Mount Hua is more important than my humanity, so I have to ask you, how did you manage to make the plum blossoms bloom with the seven sages' sword? Chung Myung looked at Hyunjong and spoke. It just happened naturally. Naturally? Yes. As I learned the seven sages' sword, the plum blossoms just bloomed. I don't know why either. It's like they were just waiting for me to show up. I see. It's just... Chung Myung looked at Hyunjong and asked, aren't all the swords of Mount Hua like that? Hyunjong looked down at the view beneath his feet without answering. After staring down at the mighty figure of Mount Hua, he said, wise. He thought there might be a secret behind what Chung Myung did. But Chung Myung's answer denied his thoughts. Right, that is Mount Hua's sword. Chung Myung was simply saying that he was ahead of the others. In other words, if the others kept training, then one day their swords would also bloom with plum blossoms. Plum blossoms. If the day came when all of Mount Hua's disciples could do that, the era of Mount Hua would begin again. Plum blossom swordsman. These were words that no one dared to say now. Plum blossoms were the symbol of Mount Hua. Naturally, the name of the one who could wield that symbol was the plum blossom swordsman. Right now, no one in Mount Hua deserved that title. But as Chung Myung said, as long as the day comes when every disciple can make the plum blossoms bloom, that title will surely be passed on properly. It's still a long way off. Ha! The atmosphere was nice. Definitely. Looking back at Chung Myung, Hyunjong saw that mischievous smile, which weirdly put his heart at ease. Hyunjong spoke with a large smile. Chung Myung, yes, sect leader? What is Mount Hua to you? Chung Myung shook his head without answering. He seemed to see his Sayoungs in the blue sky above. Mount Hua. For me, Mount Hua is, as his Sayoung said, is just Mount Hua. Now he understood a little of what that meant. Hyunjong lightly nodded when he heard that answer. It is enough that you are a disciple of Mount Hua. A warm smile formed on his lips. People just want to be here, but the world doesn't leave them alone. That's how the world works, after all. Can you manage to hold your ground? Chung Myung chuckled. If I couldn't hold my ground, I wouldn't have started. I'd be face down in the dirt somewhere. I see. Hyunjong looked at Chung Myung and softly said, if that's how you think, then Mount Hua will protect you. Mount Hua and I will protect you from everything you might have to bear. Chung Myung smiled. Nothing was asked. Hyunjong didn't ask a single thing. There must be countless things he wanted to know, but he was saying that Chung Myung being here was enough for him. The sect leader of Mount Hua. Hyunjong was born later than Chung Myung, and compared to Chung Myung, he didn't have a reputation built on strength. In terms of power or prestige, he was someone who couldn't be compared with Chung Myung. But Chung Myung acknowledged him, because this man possessed something that Chung Myung lacked. He was never the sect leader, and Chung Myung was unable to call himself a Taoist. So he couldn't help but respect this man who chose to follow his own path. Sect leader, it isn't about protecting me. Hyunjong seemed confused. We're just going together, under the name of Mount Hua. Hyunjong's slightly hardened face cracked a small smile. You are right. Hyunjong smiled softly. Chung Myung. Yes, sect leader. Promise me one thing. Chung Myung raised his head and looked into Hyunjong's soft eyes. I hope to hear more from you someday. Chung Myung opened his mouth slightly and then closed it. It felt strange. Something was being squeezed within his chest. He pressed down on the emotions he couldn't understand and looked up at the sky. I will. Someday. Right? Someday. Excitement doesn't end so easily, especially if they've been through something incredible that's never been experienced before. For months, such excitement can dominate a person's mind, let alone a few days. Mount Hua's third-class disciples were currently in such a state. Did we really win? I still can't believe it. It's like a dream. We seriously beat the Southern Edge sect. It would have been easier to accept had they been confident in their skills and regarded the Southern Edge sect as a worthy opponent. However, most of the third-class disciples believed they were weak and lacked faith in their skills. It was understandable. Their skills weren't developed through their own efforts. It would be more accurate to say that Chung Myung forcefully injected their skills into them like a weird power-up. Moreover, Chung Myung was a tyrant who made one understand the cruel realities of this depressing world. He wouldn't even explain what kind of effect the training would have on them or what level they would reach once they completed it. So, their dumbfounded reactions were only natural. I don't know what that bastard's thinking. Who? Who else, if not Chung Myung? Everyone gathered nodded in unison, like bobblehead dolls. As the aftermath of the incident swept over them, and they started to calm down, they realized how terrifying Chung Myung truly was. No one among the third-class disciples was unaware of Chung Myung's greatness. But what he did this time was so epic that he single-handedly overturned everyone's understanding of him. Jo Gul, who seemed strangely mesmerized, spoke to Yoonjong. Sahyung. Sahyung? I can't sleep. Are you even going to ask me for counseling? Not like that. Jo Gul scratched his head and spoke. Whenever I close my eyes, the sword Chunmyung showed keeps flashing in my mind. It almost feels like I'm being possessed. I can't explain it well, but it's like that. Yoonjong gulped, his heart racing. You too, huh? That sword was something else. Like, it wasn't just slicing through the air, it was slaying the whole idea of what we thought was possible. Exactly. Joe Gould nodded vigorously, his eyes wide with excitement. It's like he pulled out a cheat code or something. One moment we're training, and the next, boom, we're witnessing a masterpiece. I thought I was watching a movie, not a sword fight. Yoonjong leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Seriously, though, it's wild. I mean, if I could just unleash something like that, imagine the reactions. They'd think I'm some kind of sword-wielding god or something. Right? You'd have everyone from here to the Southern Edge sect shaking in their boots, or, their sandals. Jogol laughed, scratching his head. But do you think we can really pull off that kind of technique? Yoonjong took a deep breath, trying to focus his thoughts amidst the chaos of his mind. I never thought I'd say this, but I believe we can. Like, we're not just a bunch of random kids swinging sticks. We're disciples of Mount Hua. If we put in the work, who knows? We might even start blooming our own plum blossoms. Jogul grinned, a spark igniting in his eyes. Plum blossoms? Now that's a goal. But, I just realized something. What's that? Yoonjong asked, a brow raised. What if we can't? What if we train hard and still don't get there? What if Chungmyung's just a one-hit wonder? Yoonjong shook his head, grinning. Nah, we can't think like that. Besides, if Chungmyung can turn us into champs overnight, I say we give him a raise, or a trophy, something to show our appreciation. Right, a trophy for the goblin swordsman, Jogul exclaimed, laughing. Wait, how do you even give a trophy to a guy who already thinks he's a legend? Like, do we just roll out a red carpet or something? Yoonjong shrugged, a mischievous smile spreading across his face. Why not? We'll make it a whole ceremony, and the award for most epic sword technique goes to Chungmyung. Cue the dramatic music. Just then, the door burst open and Chungmyung swaggered in, his expression a mix of annoyance and excitement. What are you all doing exchanging warm words of encouragement like kids? Huh? I come back, and it feels like I'm stepping into a kindergarten. We were just discussing strategies. Yoonjong quickly improvised, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. Strategies, my foot. You're all daydreaming about being sword gods. Get back to training before I turn this place into a boot camp. Come on, give us a break, Jogul protested, trying to hide his laughter. We need motivation. You can't just walk in here and ruin our vibe. Chungmyung rolled his eyes. Vibe? What is this? A party? Get serious. If you think you can just coast on daydreams, you're in for a rude awakening. Okay, we'll train. But can we at least dream a little while we do it? Yoonjong countered, a cheeky grin on his face. Chungmyung crossed his arms, trying to suppress a smile. Fine. Dream while you work. Just don't come crying to me when reality smacks you in the face. With that, he turned and stormed out, leaving the door swinging behind him. Yoonjong and Jogul shared a look, then burst into laughter. I swear he's just a goblin in disguise, Jogul chuckled, wiping a tear from his eye. But man, can you believe it? We might actually get there one day. Yeah, Yoonjong said, his heart swelling with determination. We're going to make those plum blossoms bloom. Together! As they resumed their training, the excitement lingered in the air, a reminder of the incredible journey that lay ahead. Episode 115. It is enough that you are a disciple of Mount Hua 5. You are back? You worked hard. You should rest a little. They were good words, very good words, perfect for diffusing the awkward tension, like a deflated balloon at a kid's birthday party. The third-class disciples were desperate, but unfortunately, Chungmyung wasn't the type to change his mood just to make others comfortable. Nope, that's not how he rolls. Rather, he tilted his head to the side, looking like a confused puppy. Why is he doing that again? Something good just happened. Why is he back to being a sourpuss? Chungmyung, with his head turned, began to speak. Even his voice had that eerie, distorted vibe, like a horror movie villain who's about to drop some truth bombs. You all seem to be in a great mood, aren't you? Wow, look at everyone resting. After all that trouble, if it were me, I'd be out swinging my sword 1 or 10,000 times. or maybe doing some weights and running. You know, like a gym bro on a protein shake binge. These third-class disciples could handle all the hardships life threw at them, but they weren't ready for this sass from their agi of a Sahyung. Everyone desperately glanced at Yoon Jong, pleading with their eyes for him to work his magic as the great Sahyung and save them from this train wreck of a conversation. You only think of me as great Sahyung at times like this, you rotten bastards. Why don't you show me some respect in peaceful times too? It's not like I'm asking for a parade. But what could be done? The truth is, he was the great Sahyung. Ha ha ha. Yoonjong, wearing an awkward smile that screamed, "Help me," decided to intervene. Why are you so angry? I think we all did well this time. Yoonjong was trying to subtly imply that Chungmyung shouldn't be such a buzzkill after they finally turned a chain of losses into their first victory, but that bastard didn't seem to catch Yoonjong's hint. Well, Sahyungs? Chungmyung stared at the others with the intensity of a cat fixated on a laser pointer. Seeing the madness in his eyes, all their expressions darkened like someone just turned off the fun lights. What amazing people! And now you're gathering to hold a celebration too. Aren't you supposed to be training instead of wasting time? Train. Have your life goals been achieved just because you won a conference? I mean, come on. What are you, a bunch of party animals? That's what it was. That was it. Chungmyung covered his face dramatically, like a soap opera star in a crisis, and continued to rant. When I was a kid, I went to war and got stabbed, and I still got up and trained the next day. Seriously, kids these days, they have no idea. Back in my day, we walked uphill both ways to train. When did he go to war? Aren't we older than him? Isn't it good enough that we defeated the Southern Edge sect's third-class disciples? We should celebrate. Yoonjong decided to muster some courage and rebel a little. But such rebellion doesn't always end well, especially against Chungmyung, the unyielding force of nature. Defeated them? Ah, right. Well said. Just looking at them, weren't they at least 5 years younger than all of you? Are you really happy that you beat up those kids? I mean, come on. If you were in the playground, that would be straight up bullying. They looked so young. How old could they have been 2 years ago? You must have been weak as shit to lose to them. Chungmyung always knew how to hit them where it hurts most, like a well-placed jab in a sparring match. The excited air in the dorms quickly turned melancholic, like a balloon slowly deflating. If the fight went well, I wouldn't have said anything. But you twisted on your own foot and almost fell. One of the disciples flinched and looked away, clearly regretting his life choices. How could you miss and strike the shoulder when you were aiming for their head? Another disciple flinched, wondering how he was still alive after that. The bastard who lost his cool declared his victory and rushed in only to get hit and almost lose. Chungmyung, who was speaking loudly, almost as if to yell, took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling, probably wishing for a way out. I taught you all wrong. Sayoung's made no mistake. It's my fault. Jo Gul and Yoonjong exchanged hesitant looks, like two people deciding whether to jump off a cliff. What's wrong with him? How should I know? Try to fix it. Sigh. Yoonjong had a dead look in his eyes as he tried to resolve this situation, like a deer caught in headlights. Oh, of course, there were some mistakes made. But didn't it end well? In practice, mistakes happen all the time. Mistake? Yoonjong suddenly felt that ominous chill, like stepping on a Lego brick in the dark. Then being stabbed and dying on the battlefield is probably just a mistake to you as well, right? Hoo-hoo. Is this where I went wrong? You don't even try to avoid making mistakes when training. It's natural to make mistakes. This is what happens when you train with such a weak mental state. All you needed to do was swing the sword properly, and you couldn't even do that? Yoonjong gave up on stopping this demon anymore, realizing this was a losing battle. And what? Someday you'll do it properly? Someday. Chungmyung smiled brightly, a little too brightly, like a cat that just caught a mouse. When will that day come? I wonder how you manage to drag yourselves out of bed and train each day with that mentality. You're playing around and treating this conference as just another training session. Someday you'll get it right and take it seriously. Jo Gul smiled, picturing his mother nagging him. Mother, I miss you. He would yell at his mother to stop nagging, but now he wanted to apologize to her. Her nagging couldn't even be considered nagging anymore. Does this bastard have a knife in his mouth? How could each word hurt so much? It was like listening to your favorite song on repeat until it turned into a torture track. Chung Myung lowered his voice dramatically. Don't be so happy. This was only the first battle. We will have to fight countless times in the future. Right now, this may be a big deal for Sahyungs, but in hindsight, it's nothing. The third-class disciples nodded their heads like bobbleheads on a bumpy road. Can I ask one question? Anything. If we really train like you say, will we also be able to display such swordsmanship? Chung Myung's face contorted again, like he just swallowed something sour. Sahyungs, you seem to be misunderstanding something. It doesn't matter what you want. You will have to. Chung Myung blinked his eyes, wondering how much more they could take. Does it make sense for Mount Hua's disciples to be unable to display Mount Hua's techniques and make even a single flower bloom? Do you think I'll sit still and let that happen? It was strange. They were also thinking the same thing. But how can it sound so different depending on who's saying it? It's like hearing your mom's "I love you" and your buddy's "I love you, man" at the same time. The third-class disciples, filled with motivation to unleash the techniques that Chung Myung had shown, suddenly lost the will to continue, like a balloon that just lost all its air. Their eyes, once brightly burning like the sun, quickly decayed into a dead and hopeless expression. What are you doing? Huh? Chung Myung directed them with a nod of his chin. We need to go. Are you going to skip training today? Chu Chung Myung, the time is already. You said you wanted to learn that sword, didn't you? No, yes, but... No, Chung Myung, we aren't in a hurry to do that. We can do it later. Are you going to come or not? Ache! The third-class disciples rushed out of the dorm. The dorm that had been buzzing with hope was now void of such optimistic feelings, like a party that ended before the cake was served. Chung Myung watched the disciples rushing out and grinned, feeling like a cat that just knocked over a vase. I can't let them get too excited. This was just the first step. It was good that this victory instilled confidence in them. But confidence often turned to arrogance, like that one guy who shows up to a party with a karaoke machine. Real progress would be made when these disciples took their victories and followed them up with continuous training. Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders and began to follow the disciples outside when someone entered the White Plum training hall. Huh? Chung Myung tilted his head at the unexpected face. What brings you here? The eyes of the person trembled. If you see your Sasuk, you should greet them first. No, such things probably don't mean anything to you. Baekchun stared straight at Chung Myung and asked, Could you spare a few moments? Baekchun, climbing up the mountain's peak, snuck a peek at Chung Myung. Ah, my legs. Chung Myung looked around and sat on a tree stump. He seemed to perfectly fit the image of an elderly man. That little jerk. You're too young to be acting like an old man. But there was no way Baekchun could point that out. Thank you for giving me some time. It is nothing. You are my Sasuk. Baekchun felt glad. But what brings you to me? To summon me to this humble place, are you going to attack me? Although they didn't know each other for very long, Chung Myung was aware that Baekchun didn't like him. So what could he be thinking to ask Chung Myung for his time, as if there was no bad blood between them? I saw the battle between you and Jin Gum Ryong. He already worked quite heavily against you. You were overwhelming. It was nothing. Baekchun stared at Chung Myung in silence. He slowly opened his mouth after a long period. All the Sasks are quite shaken up. At first, it seemed like they were all fine, but now, everything seems complicated. That much could be guessed. As long as they had eyes, they couldn't deny what Chung Myung did. It was also true that the third-class disciples were noticeably stronger than before. The second-class disciples were meant to serve as examples and lead the third-class disciples. However, how were they supposed to feel now that the third-class disciples had the potential to become stronger than them? No, maybe the third-class disciples had already become stronger than them. So what are you trying to say? We want to be strong. Oh. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung with determined eyes. I don't know if you're aware, but as your senior, it isn't easy for me to come and say this. I fully understand. Who wouldn't understand Baekchun's feelings, especially Chung Myung? who had seen Baek Chon's struggles for himself? His mind must be a mess right now. For the first time, he felt sympathy for Baek Chon. But no matter how much I think about it, this seems like the best choice I can make. It's not that I don't believe in my Sassics, but what I can learn from them is different from what you can teach us. Chungmyung just looked at Baek Chon. So, you're here and setting aside your pride because you want me to teach the second-class disciples by myself? Yes. Chungmyung laughed bitterly. Why should I do that? Maybe it was because of the unexpected response, but Baek Chon was at a loss for words and stared blankly. It's annoying, and I don't get anything out of it, so I don't see why I should agree. I am your Sasek. Don't we belong to the same sect? So, have the second-class disciples been watching and guiding the third-class disciples? Or did you just leave and do your own training? Baek Chon went silent. He had no response. It was true that he had never paid any attention to the third-class disciples' training. I always assumed that was Eungeam Sasek's role and left it up to him. But haven't you already taken control of the third-class disciples' training? Why do you think that is? When Chungmyung asked back, Baek Chon struggled to respond. Why? Why? The reason is too simple. It was because the third-class disciples are the same rank as Chungmyung. It was annoying and troublesome now, but if they were raised well, then Chungmyung would be able to live without raising a finger in the future. Baek Chon sighed deeply. You mean that you want me to bow my head? You're making me look bad. How could I dare think that? It was implied that you shouldn't say it out loud even if you understand. Baek Chon hated that he understood what Chungmyung meant. But we are still Manhwa's disciples. Sasuk. Yes? Chungmyung spoke calmly. Did you see the third-class disciples training? I did. They seemed barely human by the end, more like stones rolling around. Just being alive seemed like a great achievement. But Baek Chon didn't say anything. Do you think I can make the Sasuks do that? The answer was, he could definitely treat them harshly. The only reason he holds himself back is so that he doesn't get caught by others. That's what Baek Chon thought, but he's a smooth talker and knew that he shouldn't say that out loud. It would be difficult since you're a good person, but I think you'd somehow manage. Yes, yes. What bullshit. Chungmyung just shrugged. But that's why I can't do it. I can make it work for the Sahyungs, but I can't do anything for my Sassics. If I do, would the first-class disciples let me continue? Baek Chon looked at Chungmyung. It's possible. Chungmyung was pointing out the problems, but he never said it was impossible. Then, if all the problems are taken care of, you can make us stronger, right? Haven't you seen the results with your own eyes? Baek Chon had certainly seen the results. That was why he was here. Baek Chon took a deep breath. Chungmyung had managed to train the third-class disciples to the point that they could overpower the Southern Edge Sect's disciples and even defeated Jin Gum Ryong and the other second-class disciples himself. Not a single second-class disciple could even touch him. Baek Chon bit his lip tightly. I will fix that issue. How? During the training, we won't be the Sassics. Those who receive guidance will be the disciples, and we will respect you as a teacher. Wow. Chungmyung looked interested, but shook his head while looking at Baek Chon. That won't be enough. Why? If you curse me after the training, then there is no way out for me. Baek Chon spoke bluntly. No, we wouldn't sink so low. With just one day of training, you'll change your words. Even the Sahyungs were troublesome at first. Baek Chon was at a loss of words. Then what do I do? If you're going to do it, you need to make it clear. Chungmyung snapped his finger. If you want to learn, whether it's time to train or not, you'll have to bow to me. Then I'll help. But if that doesn't work, then I can't do a thing for you. I need to be able to live here as well, you know. Baek Chon agonized, but not for long. Do I have any pride left? It was disgraceful to bow to a Sajil, but it was a greater disgrace to be weak. And I want to be able to display that sword one day. The sword that destroyed Jin Gum Ryong. Mount Hua's sword was branded deeply into his memory. Fine. Baek Chon answered firmly. From this moment on, you aren't a Sajil for the second-class disciples. Your title may be Sajil, but none of the second-class disciples will attempt to use that against you. I guarantee it with my name on the line. Caught you. A happy smile crept onto Chungmyung's lips. He was thinking about how he could catch these idiots, but they jumped into the net with their own feet. Really? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. All right. Then everyone will gather and come out tomorrow morning. What? Ah, no, nothing. Baekchun would only realize later on what a grave mistake he had made. Continuous training. He felt like he had pushed them too much, but this was how growth happened. Real strength didn't come from resting on one's laurels or basking in the glory of a single victory. It required grit, discipline, and relentless effort. Chung Myung watched the third-class disciples scamper out of the dorms, their enthusiasm tempered by his harsh words. It was a fine line between motivation and despair, and he relished the challenge of walking it. Let them complain. Episode 116, Plum Blossoms Will Cover the Sky Someday. 1. Dawn of the Next Day. Sahyung. Why are they here? Well, how am I even supposed to answer that? Mount Hua's third-class disciples trembled as they watched the second-class disciples approaching in the morning light. Since Mount Hua is perched high on a mountain, the morning air is like an ice cube to the face. A white fog swirled around as warm breaths escaped, creating a scene that looked like seasoned warriors shuffling toward the battlefield. Minus the glory, of course. Are we going to die today? I doubt that would happen. Before long, all the second-class disciples lined up in front of the third-class disciples like a bad reality show waiting for a plot twist. Finally, Baekchun strolled out, taking his sweet time as if he was the main character in some epic drama. Is everyone here? Yes, Sahyung. Yes. Baekchun nodded lightly, his gaze softening before he turned his eyes skyward. No way. It can't be. At that moment, the white plum blossom dorm door creaked open, and Chung Myung emerged, looking like he just got kicked out of a dream. Yan! Why is it that I can never get enough sleep? Then just sleep in. Why don't you just skip a day? How can you complain like that and still train every single day? Every single day! Chung Myung trudged over to Yoon Jung, who was clearly a nervous wreck. It was like watching a kid waiting for a dentist appointment. Chung Myung, why are they out here? Ah, Sassaks. Right, the Sassaks. Sahyung. Huh? Chung Myung threw an arm around Yoon Jung's shoulder like they were in a buddy cop movie. You must have gone through so much trouble. What's this all of a sudden? I know very well just how hard the Sahyungs have suffered and been bullied by the Sassaks. No, they've never done that. If we've ever been hit, it was always by you. Why are you suddenly dragging the Sassaks into this? But you can relax. From now on, we'll live in a beautiful world where all people are equal, at least during training. A place where all are equal? Yes? Isn't that what happens in hell? Huh? That sounds plausible? Yoon Jong's face twisted into a mix of confusion and concern. In the end, he even got the Baek disciples. This man's beastly hands stretched out without end. How long had it been since he first sent the third-class disciples to hell? And now he's saying he's got the second-class disciples in his clutches too? What's going to happen to Mount Hua? As Yoon Jong suppressed his rising dread, Chung Myung strutted to the center like he owned the place. You've all worked hard getting here this early in the morning. This instructor is very moved to see everyone voluntarily participating in the training like this. Conscienceless bastard! When was the last time you let someone rest from training? Hell is going to have a grand time punishing you. The third-class disciples bit their lips, but the second-class disciples surprisingly looked unfazed. Train hard. If you feel refreshed and rewarded after you're done, then it can't be called training. As soon as training ends, you will gasp, curse, and you won't even have the strength to lift your chopsticks. You need to be prepared to shove your face onto your plate just to eat after experiencing real training. What encouraging words, right? Who wouldn't want to sign up for that? There is no gentle path to becoming strong. Pushing harder and harder with your best effort is the only way to become strong. If you trust and follow this instructor, you will become strong. Do you understand? Yoon Jong's face twisted further. No, he can't act like that to the seniors. It will sting him back. And then it happened. Yes! The loud response from the second-class disciples made the third-class disciples step back in shock, like they'd just seen a ghost. What? What is wrong with them? Being taught by someone who might be the age of their younger brother must be embarrassing. But that didn't seem to bother them at all. It would be a disgrace if we fall behind the third-class disciples. It was shameful to receive Chung Myung's training. But the thought of becoming weaker than the third-class disciples was terrifyingly shameful. But it was happening. The second-class disciples were still stronger for now, but the third-class disciples would likely stand above them in a few years. How would they retain their pride and dignity if they allowed themselves to fall behind their juniors? I can't allow that to happen. I'd rather die than see that. The eyes of the second-class disciples were bloodshot, fueled by their insecurities and pride. Sometimes a person's spirit is ignited the most by impure motives. The more impure, the greater the motivation, right? A pure desire for strength alone wouldn't push the second-class disciples this hard. Their pride and insecurity lit a fire under them. And lastly, I don't know how, but if we learn from that guy, we might be able to defeat the Southern Edge sect's second-class disciples. No, we can do more than that. It is better to be looked down on in the sect than to be ridiculed out in the world for being weak. Look at them. As he received the sparkling gazes of the second-class disciples, Chung Myung said, "This is it." They were eyes that craved to learn. Chung Myung felt like a proud parent seeing his kids burning with passion while holding back their complaints. It was a refreshing change from the third-class disciples, who always looked like they were one bad day away from a breakdown. Of course, the third-class disciples used to be brighter and more optimistic before he arrived, but who had time to dwell on the past? Well then. Chung Myung flashed a smile that was equal parts charming and mischievous. The basics are important in anything. Let's start with strength training. Sahyungs, what are you doing? You need to teach the seniors how the strength training is done. At those words, the rest of the third-class disciples beamed, practically vibrating with excitement. Ah, right. Ahem. I will do my best. The third-class disciples' eyes gleamed with a crazed intensity that screamed, "You should get a taste of it too." You thought this training would be good for you, didn't you? If they try it once, their screams will be heard for at least 3 months. Their cries will make a wonderful song. The third-class disciples wore sinister smiles that made the second-class disciples sweat bullets. But unexpectedly, someone stepped forward amid the impending crisis. Huh. Chung Myung tilted his head when he saw Yu Yisol standing in front of him. What now? To learn. Learn from the kids over there. No one came to me. Chung Myung tilted his head, processing this unexpected twist. No, why would no one? What are the Sahyungs doing? The disciples heard Chung Myung and quickly turned away, staring at the dawning sky like it held all the answers. To feel awkward just because she's a woman. Wait, come to think of it, why don't we have any girls in our class? Why do we only have men? There are a lot of women among the back disciples. Chung Myung turned to Yoon Jong and said, No, Sahyung, did you only accept men as disciples for our class? That's why our dorm is so dark and gloomy. Chung Myung. Huh? Yoon Jong looked at Chung Myung. His expression resembling someone who just got told their favorite snack was discontinued. There are some subjects in the world that shouldn't be touched. Chung Myung gazed at Yoon Jong for a long time, then bowed his head like a child caught stealing cookies. I was wrong. I apologize. Please forgive me. Be careful from now on. I will. After apologizing, he looked at Yu Yisil. I won't think of you as a woman. That's what I was hoping for. Even if you cry, I won't go easy. That won't happen. No fear, just determination. Promise me one thing instead. What? If I endure this, will you teach me how to make the plum blossoms bloom on my sword? Everyone is saying such strange things. Chung Myung spoke with a stiff face. If Sahyungs and Sasuks are the disciples of Mount Hua, you shouldn't be aiming to make plum blossoms. That's just a part of the process. What you should be aiming for is completion. Completion. Well, right. Then, Chung Myung shrugged. First, let's build the foundation for enlightenment. Let's go. As the second-class disciples moved, Chung Myung grinned wickedly. In the past, I only cared about my own skills and didn't pay attention to my Sajays or Sahyungs. I was just a lone wolf, chasing my ambitions without a second thought for those around me. But now, things were different. I had come to realize that strength wasn't just about individual prowess. It was about building a solid foundation with those who walked alongside me. After all, Mount Hua's opponent wasn't just one strong man, but an entire sect. We needed to band together, to sharpen each other's skills and stand united against any threats. What if one day we became strong enough to support one another? A wicked smile crept onto my face as I envisioned it. Kuhaha! It'll be done! A strong team, and then I'll draw plum blossoms on the heads of the Shaolin. The disciples of Mount Hua, who thought they heard something they shouldn't have, hastily closed their ears and turned their heads, pretending to focus on their training. Unjiam let out a pleasant sigh as he watched the disciples of Mount Hua immersed in training. Now it's the Beck disciples, he mused. Well, this was bound to happen. After what they had seen, they must have had some complex feelings. He recalled the conversation he had with the sect leader yesterday. Leave him alone. The sect leader continued. He is a child that we cannot restrain regardless. Interfering with that child may instead hinder his path and get in the way of what he has planned. We're old. What we must do is make sure that the children are able to grow and shine in the future. So, we'll leave it at that. That child is on the path of Tao, so I believe that he will never lead the others down the wrong path. Hyunjong believed that Ungium shouldn't poke around and make the child wary or question his intent for no reason. Ungium agreed. Chung Myung's plum blossoms, incomprehensible skills, and unknown origins obscured the child in many mysteries. There were numerous questions, but Ungeum didn't want to ask. Path of Tao. The path of the Tao is to go with the flow and embrace what may come. There was no reason why Chung Myung couldn't have his way as long as he was a disciple of Mount Hua. The path of a Tao is known to be large. Rather, should I learn it too? After observing the children for a long time, Unjiam slowly turned away with a bitter smile. I'm being greedy. Even if he could become stronger, Unjiam knew that it would be better for him to focus on his current task. He was already old now. It would be difficult to try and become stronger. It was fortunate that the Baek disciples were still young enough to learn. But I cannot just stay still and watch. How could he be lazy when the children were trying so hard? Even if he left teaching to Chung Myung, he should help teach them as much as he could. Mount Hua will grow stronger. The Southern Edge sect isn't the end. Mount Hua had changed since Chung Myung arrived. Ungiam also recently realized that he was being pulled into that flow. Now, the atmosphere of the elders had begun to change. At least these children shouldn't be burdened. He had to do everything to help them. And when the day comes that those children complete their martial arts path, the world will see the second coming of Mount Hua. It was a far-off goal. Unjiam turned his head slowly. Straighten your back and practice. Waist too. If you still have strength to breathe, then you shouldn't have a problem training. What? It's fine. It's fine. You won't die from this. Have you ever heard of anyone dying from training? Just train. Unjiam trembled, feeling both horrified and amused. Enough? Enough? Aigu, are you really saying that? Just because you mastered a little bit of martial arts? Maybe we should take a look at those martial arts of yours? Come on, let's see if it's quicker to die from the training or from shame. Having seen the third-class disciples rush in to stop Chung Myung and assist with helping the others train, Ungiam stared off into the distant sky. Maybe it isn't that far off after all. He felt a surge of hope. The sound of laughter, the shouts of determination, and the clashing of practice swords filled the air. The spirit of Mount Hua was awakening, and with each passing day, it was growing stronger. Perhaps the future was bright after all, and the plum blossoms would indeed cover the sky someday, blooming not just in beauty, but in the strength and unity of those who trained beneath them. Episode 117, Plum Blossoms Will Cover the Sky Someday, too. Chung Myung climbed the Lotus Peak and looked up at the sky. No longer needing to hide his training, he found that being up here calmed his mind. It was like comfort food for his soul, if his soul had taste buds, that is. After gazing at the sky for a long time, he turned around and looked at Mount Hua. He had overcome the first mountain, but he wasn't satisfied yet, like a kid who just found out there's more to life than a chocolate chip cookie. We still have a long way to go. Even though he knew that impatience leads to anger, he couldn't help but feel the itch of impatience crawling under his skin. The development of the third-class disciples wasn't slow. At this rate, They'd be warriors that even the biggest bullies in the world wouldn't dare to mess with. But that was a distant future, and right now, Mount Hua was about as intimidating as a wet noodle. This is the start. Chung Myung felt a tremendous weight bearing down on his shoulders. Now, the disciples would instinctively come looking for him whenever something went down. It was déjà vu. He'd been in this position before, but the looks on their faces were totally different this time. Sa-young's must have had a tough time. Pushing a leader's back forward? Easy peasy. But actually taking the lead? That took guts, like trying to convince your friend to jump off the high dive at the pool. Back in the day, Chung Myung thought he was leading Mount Hua. The most famous figure from Mount Hua was the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, and it was his swagger that kept Mount Hua on the map. So, did Chung Myung really lead the sect? No. His heart ached like he'd just watched a sad puppy movie. Back then, if Chung Myung had known what he understood now, perhaps Mount Hua's fate would have been different. Not just for Mount Hua's descendants, but his Sahyungs could have had a shot at living happily ever after too. Even when they knew they were marching toward doom, they all did it with a smile. Classic, I'm totally fine behavior. It's pointless. Chung Myung shook his head like he was trying to get rid of bad vibes. The past was already set in stone. What mattered now wasn't sulking over what could have been, but living in the present and using the past as a GPS to a better future. To do that, more than anything, I need to be stronger. That was the only way to avoid losing everything again, like a bad game of Monopoly where everyone else ends up rich and you're left crying in the corner. Chung Myung knew. This world of martial arts was ruthless, like trying to negotiate with a hungry bear. Agreement? Sure, it exists. Loyalty? You bet. But those are just fancy words the strong throw around while the weak are left in the dust. If you lacked strength, you couldn't even choose the toppings on your pizza, let alone discuss loyalty. Mount Hua's disciples probably thought they'd seen enough of the world's cruel side. They might have thought they'd suffered all there was to suffer during their downfall. But the truth? Oh, sweet summer child. It wasn't over yet. Sooner or later, they would learn. They were wrapped up in the rugged embrace of Mount Hua, protected by the badass deeds that Chung Myung and the former Mount Hua accomplished. But that bubble of safety was about to burst. Mount Hua was going to re-enter the wild world, and when that happened, they'd face brutality like never before, like stepping on a Lego barefoot. I have no intention of carrying it on my shoulders. Chung Myung needed to create a safe space for them to lean on, whether it be Mount Hua or himself. Sitting cross-legged, he closed his eyes and inspected his foundation like a handyman checking his tools. He could see it. His dantian was the size of a small fruit, comparable to a cherry when he used to have a pitifully small pea. But it was growing, little by little, like his determination after one too many cups of coffee. Mount Hua's martial arts were methodical, no shortcuts allowed. It was a grind that could lead you to the peak, one painstaking step at a time. I will get stronger. He wouldn't grow as the Plum Blossom Sword Saint from the past, but as Chung Myung in the here and now. He was determined to become stronger, like a Pokemon evolving into something way cooler. And one day, I'll surpass him, the heavenly demon. An endless journey towards perfecting nothingness. Sounds poetic, doesn't it? Chung Myung quietly lifted his head and looked up. Have our plum blossoms bloomed? Not yet. But someday it will bloom. One day, when the plum blossoms truly bloomed on Chung Myung's sword, not only Mount Hua, but the entire world would be covered in their sweet, intoxicating scent, like a really good perfume commercial. Chung Myung jumped up. Don't worry, my Sahyung. Chung Myung laughed, a sound that echoed off the mountain. I am Chung Myung. It was a quiet declaration, a commitment to himself, like promising to actually use that gym membership. Chung Myung slowly descended the mountain. As he made his way down with a slight smile plastered on his face, he caught a whiff of plum blossoms wafting through the air. Must be spring. Plum blossoms were blooming, bringing all the good vibes. Basking in the scent that tickled his nose, Chung Myung continued his descent with lightened steps. His figure mirrored the resolute spirit that would silently continue to look after Mount Hua. Time flowed ceaselessly as Mount Hua embraced Chung Myung and began to embark on a new path. The blossoms bloomed again, and then once more. The plum blossoms bloomed twice and faded. Years rolled on like a river, endless and sometimes annoying. Hua village. A figure carrying their own luggage entered the bustling village. Is this Hua It was a man. Well, more like a boy playing dress up as a man. He looked around with a slightly flustered face, like he'd just walked into the wrong party. Is this the right place? What he saw with his own two eyes seemed like a far cry from the memories he had. The Hua he remembered was a small place, stuck in the awkward phase between a town and a city. It had a prosperous history, but felt about as lively as a soggy slice of bread. But now? Now it was like a city that had just chugged 3 energy drinks. Of course, it couldn't compete with the big cities in terms of scale, but with all the newly built buildings lining the streets and shops overflowing with customers, the word village felt like a bad joke. Did I come to the wrong place? He asked the passerby. Excuse me? Is this Hua First time? No, it's not my first time. I came here about a decade ago, I think. It's way different now. The passerby chuckled. If it's your first time back in 10 years, it makes sense that you're confused. Even those who come back after just 1 or 2 years are shocked. Ah, so this is Hua Yes, it's strange since it changed so much, but this is the Hua you knew. Thank you, but why has the village changed so much? Why? All thanks to Mount Hua. Huh? You don't know Mount Hua? The Mount Hua Sect? Ah, no. I know about Mount Hua. The man, Wei Sohang, nodded quickly. If you told the people of Hua that you didn't know Mount Hua, they'd look at you like you just said you didn't believe in gravity. For the locals, Mount Hua was more than a sect. It was their pride, confidence, and family all rolled into one. I'm here to visit Mount Hua. Oh? Is that so? You're a guest. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm like a walking FAQ. When the man heard Wei Soheng was there to visit Mount Hua, his face lit up like a kid who just found out they were getting ice cream. What do you mean when you said Hua changed because of Mount Hua? It's just as I said. These days, Mount Hua's influence is piercing the heavens. Haven't you heard? Their reputation is spreading everywhere. No, because I'm not from around here, but I'm not about to tell him that. He looks like he could bench press a mountain. He couldn't muster the courage to admit he didn't know. Something told him that saying anything slightly ignorant about Mount Hua would be like poking a bear with a stick. Right. So recently, more and more people are flocking to visit Mount Hua. As more people visit, they end up passing through Hua Look around. It's pretty crowded, right? Yes. Where people gather, money flows. So naturally, this place changed. It's quite a dramatic change. Ha ha ha. All thanks to Mount Hua. You have to know, right? At the conference with the Southern Edge sect 2 years ago, Mount Hua wrecked their reputation like a wrecking ball smashing through a paper wall. The once prominent sect, which had been gaining momentum, found itself on the receiving end of a humiliating defeat that shattered its standing in the martial world. The news spread like wildfire, and the tales of that fateful encounter echoed through taverns and training halls, each retelling more exaggerated than the last. Even the children playing in the streets knew of the Fallen Dragon Conference, where the mighty Southern Edge sect came crashing down from its lofty heights. For Mount Hua, it was a moment of resurgence, and the respect it commanded surged alongside the excitement of its disciples. The villagers of Hua beamed with pride as they recounted the event, feeling the warmth of glory radiating from their once-forgotten sect. The Southern Edge sect, not any other sect, but the Southern Edge sect. How high has Mount Hua's reputation soared after that incident? I can't even fathom how many people have come to Mount Hua since then, the passerby continued, his voice swelling with enthusiasm. Wei Sohang nodded, absorbing every word. The shift in Mount Hua's status was undeniable. It had transformed from a shadow of its former self to a beacon of hope for many, drawing in visitors and believers alike. If it hadn't been for the Southern Edge sect's disgrace, Wei Sohang would likely have never set foot in Hua much less think of visiting Mount Hua. It's just a little unfortunate, the villager said with a sigh, glancing around as if searching for something more. Huh? Wei Sohang raised an eyebrow, intrigued. It's been 2 years since then. Something needs to happen now, the man replied, a slightly annoyed expression crossing his face. Ah, Wei Sohang understood. The fervor surrounding Mount Hua needed a spark, a reminder that the sect was still a force to be reckoned with. The villager continued. Well, a giant doesn't move so easily. Isn't there a legend about the great bird that rested for 1,000 years before traveling thousands of miles in a single flap of its wings? Perhaps our Mount Hua is like that too. A sense of pride filled the air as the man spoke, a pride that Wei Soheng could almost feel radiating off him. This wasn't just a sect. It was a lifeline for the villagers, a part of their identity that had been reborn. Wei Soheng, however, had different motives for visiting. He knew the changes at Mount Hua could offer the assistance his family needed, especially after the hardships they had faced in recent years. There was a glimmer of hope that cooperation with such a powerful sect could help restore his family's standing. If you are planning to visit Mount Hua, find a place to stay. The sun will set soon, and if you start the climb now, you'll be climbing through the middle of the night. It would be better to start your journey tomorrow morning, the villager advised, gesturing toward the inn at the end of the street. Yes. Thank you, Wei Soheng replied, his mind racing with thoughts of the sect and the possible alliance. Sure. The elderly man waved his hand and walked away, leaving Wei Soheng to ponder the future. As he looked around, he marveled at the transformation of the village. What was once a small, unassuming place had become a vibrant hub, bustling with life and energy. The people of Hua thrived, their spirits lifted by the renewed vigor of Mount Hua. It changed so much, Wei Soheng mused. The village had grown prosperous just because the sect gained a little fame. He began to understand why everyone, whether they were people or sects, was willing to risk everything for recognition and power. He raised his head and gazed at Mount Hua, determination brewing within him. The current Mount Hua was different from the one he had known of in the past, and he was resolved to find a way to cooperate with them. Mount Hua will surely help us. Go to Mount Hua and ask for help. I hope my father's judgment isn't wrong. Wei Soheng bit his lip, heart racing with anticipation and anxiety as he quickly headed into the village, ready to carve out his own path and seize the opportunities that awaited him at Mount Hua. Episode 118, Plum Blossoms Will Cover the Sky Someday. Quack! Tack! Finally, Wei Soheng reached the peak of the final hill, gasping for breath like he'd just run a marathon. Damn, this mountain's no joke. Just like before, this mountain was hell-bent on keeping people away. Steep as a cliffhanger ending in your favorite show, and with so many sheer drops, you'd think it was designed to make climbers question their life choices. But hey, it wasn't as bad this time around. Unlike before, someone finally thought of installing some stakes on the cliff, with ropes between them, making the whole climb way easier. Whoever did that deserves a medal, or at least a high five for not being a sadist. Huck! Still, this is brutal. Wei Soheng wiped the sweat from his brow with his sleeve, looking like he'd just emerged from a sauna. The Wudang sect might have fancy rules like leaving your weapons and horses at the gate, but not Mount Hua. Oh no, this place didn't need those rules because no horse could even dream of making this climb. Everyone who climbed Mount Hua did it the hard way, using only their own hands and feet, like some sort of cruel rite of passage. Welcome to Mount Hua, where even the mountain judges you. I don't know who came up with this system, but I gotta admit, it's kinda brilliant. It's like an automatic humility check. Mount Hua had history, sure, but the fact that they kept this punishing tradition alive? That spoke volumes about their dedication, or their love for watching people suffer. Dripping in sweat, Wei Soheng finally laid eyes on the big, fancy gate of Mount Hua. Why doesn't anything look familiar? Even the gate had been upgraded. The last time he visited, the gate was practically falling apart. Now, this new grand gate seemed almost out of place. With the words Great Mount Hua Sect beautifully carved above, he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. Definitely not the run-down place I remember. He approached the gate with anticipation bubbling up inside him, almost like when you think you're about to hit the jackpot on a slot machine. The gate stood large and imposing, but it looked like no one was guarding it. Probably too early for that. Still, he had a job to do, so he knocked. Anyone here? Thud! 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 I'm here to visit the sect. Come on, someone's got to be here, right? He wasn't sure if yelling was the best move, but there weren't exactly many options. A guest wants to visit Mount Hua. Anybody home? Wei Soheng called out, trying to sound polite while also resisting the urge to kick the door. After a few moments, just when he started to think he'd have to camp out, he heard the gate creak open. A guy stuck his head out, looking about as enthusiastic as someone working the graveyard shift. "We're not accepting visitors today." "Huh? Mount Hua's closed for visitors. Come back tomorrow." "Wait, what? I didn't hear anything about that." Wei Soheng was dumbfounded. No wonder the mountain had been so empty. "Bye." The guy moved to close the door, but Wei Soheng quickly shouted, "Wait, hold up, man. What now? Listen, I'm not just a visitor. I really need to see the sect leader of Mount Hua. It's urgent." Yeah, everyone thinks their problem's urgent. Come back tomorrow." "I'm serious. I'm from Huayong Gate." Baek Sang, the guy who opened the door, finally raised an eyebrow. "Huayong Gate, huh?" "Yes, I really need to meet with the sect leader about an important matter concerning Huayong Gate. Please, could you at least pass along a message for me?" Baek Sang looked Wei Soheng up and down. "Huayong Gate, huh? Never heard of it." "That's because... But hey, I don't know everything. I'll go check with someone who does. Just hang tight for a minute." Baek Sang shut the door, leaving Wei Soheng standing there like a rejected door-to-door salesman. At least they didn't kick me out. As he waited, Wei Soheng couldn't help but feel the weight of the place pressing down on him. Even the guy at the door had a presence that made him feel like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. This is Mount Hua, all right? He was starting to sweat for an entirely different reason now. What if they really didn't care about Huayong Gate anymore? Mount Hua had been making waves recently. Maybe they didn't need the little guy anymore. Just then, the door flew open with a loud thud, and Baek Sang stepped out, looking a lot more serious this time. "You said Huayong Gate, right?" "Yes, that's right." "Follow me. The sect leader will meet you immediately." "Huh? Come in." Wei Soheng, now completely baffled, followed Baek Sang through the gates. His heart was pounding like a drum. "I'm in." Inside, he found himself face to face with Hunjong, the leader of Mount Hua, who greeted him with a kind smile. But Wei Soheng felt anything but calm. This guy was a living legend, and just sitting across from him made Wei's legs feel like jelly. And if that wasn't bad enough, seated on either side of Hunjong were some seriously intimidating-looking dudes. "How did I end up here?" he gulped. "All right," Hunjong said. "You said you're from Huayong Gate?" "Yes, sect leader. I'm Wei Soheng from Huayong Gate," Hunjong nodded. "I see. I'm Hunjong, the sect leader of Mount Hua. It's an honor to meet you." Hunjong smiled warmly. "Relax. There's no need to be so tense. I'm just naturally nervous." Hunjong pointed at the tea in front of them. "Here, have some tea. It might help you settle down." "Thank you." Wei Soheng grabbed the cup like it was a life preserver, but honestly, he was too jittery to even notice what the tea tasted like. "So, Huayong Gate. I believe it's been about 13 years since we last had contact? You remember?" "Of course. You must be the little boy I saw back then." "Yes, that's right." Wei Soheng could hardly believe it. Back then, he was too young to understand what it meant to climb this mountain. Now, it was like stepping into a whole new world. Mount Hua's really turned things around. The once crumbling sect was now practically dripping with wealth. Even the training grounds looked majestic, enough to make Wei Soheng almost faint from shock. Money really does change things. Just then, the door slammed open. "Huayong Gate? Did someone from Huayong Gate come to visit?" An old man burst in, looking like he was about to charge into battle. Before Wei Soheng could even introduce himself, the man was upon him, grinning like a madman and clapping him on the shoulder. "Huayong Gate. Of course, it's Huayong Gate. Ha ha ha. This kid's got to be one of theirs." "What's wrong? Come on, speak up. If you've got any troubles, just say the word, and we'll sort it out for you." Wei Soheng was beyond confused. Where was this overwhelming hospitality coming from? Hyunjong sighed, clearly tired of the old man's antics. "Hyunyoung, settle down. You're going to scare the poor boy." "But sect leader, this is Huayong Gate we're talking about." "Yes, I know." Hyunyoung wasn't about to stop. For over 30 years, Huayong Gate has been sending us money, even when we were broke and struggling. Now, everyone's cozying up to us, but back then, people treated us like dirt. But not Huayong Gate. They're the real deal. "Bro, calling your sect dirt in front of outsiders. Come on." Hanyang wasn't done yet. "They've been sending us cash for 30 years without asking for anything in return." That's loyalty, man. Loyalty. Hyunjong, looking like he had a headache, rubbed his temples. All right, enough. Let the boy speak. Reluctantly, Hyunyoung sat down, but not before offering to lend Wei Sohang money at a special low interest rate. Hyunjong sighed deeply. When will he ever grow up? Turning back to Wei Sohang, Hyunjong said, Now then, what brings you to Mount Hua? Wei Sohang took a deep breath. My father sent me to Mount Hua on behalf of Huayong Gate. We have a request. A request? Yes, sect leader. We want Disciple Chung Myung, Mount Hua's divine dragon. The moment Wei Sohang mentioned Chung Myung, the room grew tense and everyone's expressions darkened as if they just heard the name of a troublemaker. Episode 119. Plum blossoms will cover the sky someday. Chung Myung? Yes, sect leader. Look here. Was it Wei Sohang? Yes, sect leader. Rather than jumping to the main point, why don't you explain the situation first? Ah, sorry, I wasn't thinking straight. The situation. Wei Sohang began to explain what happened. Huayong Gate is a subsect of Mount Hua. Generally, the disciples of a large sect are split into two categories. The ride or die ones who pledge their lives to Mount Hua, and the thanks for the training, see ya later types. The first group is the full-time disciples, who basically marry the sect. They get their names and lives handed to them by the sect and stick around to polish their swords and pretend they're Zen masters. Then you've got the temporary disciples, those who flirt with Mount Hua, but eventually head off to explore the world. When they leave, they start their own thing, a subsect. It's like opening a franchise of a popular brand, but without the golden arches. Huayong Gate was one such franchise, under Mount Hua's influence. In return for using Mount Hua's street cred, they sent a chunk of change every year, and Mount Hua helped solve their problems. It was like paying rent to the landlord in exchange for a little muscle. Back in Mount Hua's glory days, they had hundreds of these subsects, but now, barely a handful. They're like the forgotten branches of a gym chain no one remembers. But Huayong Gate was different. They still sent money to Mount Hua regularly, despite being a bit meh in martial arts. It's not like they're turning out Shaolin-level warriors. But hey, they recognize Mount Hua, said one of the elders. Right, Huayong Gate has always been good about showing respect. Then the trouble started. Across the street, a new training center opened, Path's Edge Training. And guess what? They got backing from the Wudang sect, the sect with a fat wallet. They started scooping up all the fresh talent like it was Black Friday at a martial arts sale. Huayong Gate didn't pay much attention at first, figuring their rep in Nanyang would keep them afloat. But soon enough, Path's Edge went full scorched earth mode, even sending goons to trash-talk Huayong Gate. Wei Sohang's father, who couldn't handle the harassment, got whooped by the head of Path's Edge. Oh, hell no, Hyunyoung jumped up. They put hands on Huayong Gate's master? Where's my sword? I'll rip them apart and feed them their own fists. Hyun Sang, ever the cooler head, pulled Hyunyoung down. Calm down, Tiger, he muttered. Wei Sohang continued. But that wasn't the worst part. Path's Edge is planning to completely drive us out of Nanyang, and they've called in backup from the Wudang sect. My father sent me here to beg for Mount Hua's help. If Mount Hua doesn't step in, Huayong Gate will be wiped off the map. Wei Sohang hit the floor, bowing so hard it looked like he was trying to drill a hole with his forehead. Sect leader, please help us. If Mount Hua doesn't act, Huayong Gate is finished. Hanjong sighed. So the Path's Edge is really affiliated with Wudang? Yes, sect leader. Wudang, of course it's them. They're the Microsoft of martial arts. Monopoly-hungry bastards. Hyunyoung snorted. Richest sect in the world, my foot? You really think their wealth comes from meditation and selling incense? They'll slap their name on anything if it means they can rake in more cash. Hyunjong nodded, his face somber. Power, huh, he muttered. It was clear that this wasn't just about one subsect getting bullied. If Mount Hua wanted to make a comeback, they couldn't afford to look weak now. This was about reclaiming their place in the world. And besides, they couldn't just let Wudang walk all over them. The elders started weighing in. Shouldn't we help? It's tricky. There's that unspoken rule that subsect disputes are left to second-class disciples to handle. Subsect problems weren't supposed to escalate into full-blown wars between the main sects. That's how the Kang Ho, the martial arts world, kept things from getting too bloody. If we help, we should send the Baek disciples, one elder suggested. Or, Wei So-heng suddenly spoke up. Can you send the third-class disciples? Specifically, Chung Myung? Hyun-jung's face went pale. You want to take Chung Myung? Yes, if possible. The elders' expressions screamed bad idea, but they all nodded anyway, like, yeah, sure, why not ruin our day? Okay, we'll discuss this, Hyun-jung finally said, sending Wei So-heng out. Once the room was cleared, Hun-young exploded again. This is Hwayoung Gate. They helped us when we were broke and eating instant noodles. Damn it! We owe them. We should send the kids and go kick some Wudang ass. We aren't dogs, Hyun-young. We don't bite people, Hyun-sang muttered. Is there anything worse than a dog? Because that's exactly what those Wudang pricks are. Hyun-jung sighed, trying to regain control. Wudang is no joke, Hyun-sang reminded everyone. Their disciples are top tier, and their main sect always sends their best. This won't end well if we're not careful. Everyone looked to Unam, the voice of reason. There's more at stake here than just helping Hwayoung Gate. If we send disciples, it'll look like Mount Hua is officially stepping back into the Kangho. And our kids might get crushed by Wudang, Hyun-jung added. But there's one other thing. What's that? Can we really unleash Chung Myung on the world? Silence. The room fell into a collective anxiety attack. Eun-jeom smiled slightly. There's nothing to debate. Send him. Hyun-jung blinked. Are you sure? The world will have to face Chung Myung eventually. Better it happens sooner than later. Yoon-jong flinched. You said it was a long way? Yes. So Chung Myung will be going a long way out? Yes. A slightly irreverent light flickered in Yoon-jong's eyes. If that light could be translated into words, it would say, Are you all crazy? But no matter how shocked he was, he couldn't speak those words out loud. I understand. Yoon-jong, who couldn't speak his true thoughts, made his intentions clear by speaking in a different tone. Then let's go. Yes! Wei So-heng followed Yoon-jong. Hyun-jong let out a low sigh as he watched Yoon-jong leave. I don't know if this is good, but this was a sign. Wei So-heng glanced at Yoon-jong walking next to him. He seems to be the same age as me, or maybe a couple years younger. But just because they were similar in age didn't mean that their skills were equivalent. The atmosphere around Yoon-jong was like a lake, quiet and deep, like being submerged in a lake. It made Wei So-heng realize that Mount Hua was genuinely superior. This was the difference between a disciple of the main sect and one from a subsect. Wei So-heng was in a state of admiration for this disciple, who was even younger than himself. Excuse me, what is it? What kind of person is Mr. Chung Myung? Yoon-jong's eyes slightly trembled when he heard this question. In his excitement to know more, Wei So-heng didn't seem to notice and continued. Everyone knows the name of Mount Hua's divine dragon, Chung Myung. But after the Fallen Dragon after the Mount Hua Southern Edge Sect Conference, there hasn't been any word about him. So everyone wonders about what kind of person Chung Myung could be. Some say that he's a great person. A great person? Yes. Is that what others think? Yes. Right. What kind of person is Mr. Chung Myung? Evil. Huh? I think it would be better for you to experience it yourself, rather than hear it from me. Yoon-jong, who was walking ahead, thought to himself. Great person, my ass! He's a bastard! If that guy is a great person, then I'm Confucius. Wei So-heng seemed to hear Yoon-jong mumbling to himself, but I must have misheard him just now. It was difficult to think that such an austere-looking disciple could say such a thing. After leaving the sect and climbing the mountain for a long time, the two arrived at a large cliff. It seemed like a bloody cliff. Here? This is Plum Blossom Peak. It's a place we go in order to isolate ourselves from human resources, train, and seek enlightenment. Disciple Chung Myung is seeking enlightenment? You can think that. Yoon-jong, who was about to say something else, shook his head. He has to experience it to understand. Wait for a moment. I will call Chung Myung. Of course! Yoon-jong left Wei So-heng and went forward. He stood in front of a huge cave that was blocked by a massive boulder, and then let out a deep sigh. Soon after, Chung Myung. A whisper so quiet that a mosquito's buzzing would drown it out. Chungmyung. If someone could hear such a tiny whisper from inside that cave rather than a person, wouldn't that be a ghost? While Wei Soheng wondered what the hell Yoonjong was doing, Yoonjong whispered again. Chungmyung? Finally, Yoonjong quickly turned around and ran back to Wei Soheng. It seems like Chungmyung is deeply engrossed in his training and can't hear me, so we might not see him today. What? What bullshit? How could anyone hear your whispering from inside that cave? Ah, no disciple. Yoonjong put his index finger on his lips. This is good for both of us. Let's just pretend we don't know anything about this. I'm not doing this for me. It was at that moment. Bang! An explosive sound roared out as if the sky was collapsing. The boulder blocking that huge cave exploded and shattered everywhere. Quack! Wei Soheng panicked, but Yoonjong just covered his face with both hands. The entire area was filled with dust. Wei Soheng looked at the scene around him with a blank face. A vaguely human silhouette began to emerge from the cloud of dust. Step, step. Hearing the daunting footsteps approaching, Wei Soheng had a gut feeling. That man is Mount Hua's divine dragon, one of the world's most prominent young geniuses who defeated 10 of the Southern Edge sect's second-class disciples single-handedly. His reputation may be even greater than Mount Hua's. The silhouette in the dust became clearer and more human as the form stepped closer. Leaving the dust cloud behind, Chungmyung walked out like a hero from Legends before looking at Wei Soheng. It feels overwhelming. This man is it was then. Ah, shit! I almost died in that place. This is why I didn't want to do the closed-door training. I cannot eat and live off those pills. I will not. Change the training. Ah, I guess it's not him after all. No way. Episode 120. Plum blossoms will cover the sky someday 5. He was taller than expected. Wei Soheng knew that Mount Hua's divine dragon was young, but damn, he seemed bigger than he imagined. Not towering like a skyscraper, but solid. And he's handsome? Pretty decent. Almost enough to make someone question their taste. With a well-balanced body to match, he looked like the kind of guy who'd get unsolicited nods of approval wherever he went. Well, except for the permanent look of I just stepped on a Lego piece that he wore on his face. Cough! Cough! Ugh! Why is it so dusty? Bro, didn't you just make the mess? Why throw a tantrum if you're the one stirring the pot? Chungmyung, looking like he had been dragged through a battlefield in that old, dusty uniform, glared at Yoonjong with the same energy as someone who found a hair in their food. Is it today? No? Huh? Not today? There's 3 days left. Then why am I here? The sect leader was looking for you. Kuok, the sect leader's always got my back. Released me early from the closed training, huh? Sahyung, let me tell you, you don't want that smoke. I've been living off those damn fasting pills for 3 months, and I swear they're starting to grow in my stomach. No, something's come up. Huh? What now? Chungmyung tilted his head toward Wei Soheng, like someone about to ask why they're being charged extra for fries. Who's this guy? Wei Soheng from the Huayong Gate. Huayong Gate? You know about it? Why would I? He squinted at Wei Soheng, who was starting to feel like he walked into the wrong room at a party. Huayong Gate, huh? I remember that name. Thought all the branches would have crashed and burned with Mount Hua. Guess someone didn't get the memo. Huayong Gate is a subsect of Mount Hua. Oh, really? So why are you here? Let's go see the sect leader and find out. Well, lead the way, boss. As they walked, Wei Soheng couldn't stop side-eyeing Chungmyung. Something about him wasn't adding up. After a while, he turned to Yoonjong and whispered, Is that the guy? I'm Chungmyung. Oh, yes. Haha, I figured. Wait, what? Hold up, this joker is the divine dragon? Wei Soheng's brain short-circuited. He had been expecting a mystical calm master, the kind who drinks tea while meditating under a waterfall, not some dude who looked like he'd rob you of your lunch money. This guy, really? He looks more like a bouncer at a sketchy bar. Without Yoonjong beside him, Wei Soheng felt like Chungmyung would throw him into a dark alley and take his wallet. Childhood trauma flashed in his mind as he held on to his belongings for dear life. Are the rumors all wrong? This didn't seem like the man who trashed the Southern Edge sect and beat Jin Jemryong into a pulp. Wash up first, then come see the sect leader. Why? Please. Fine. I'll be back in a bit. As Chung Myung walked off, Wei Soheng grabbed Yoon Jong by the sleeve. Is he really Mount Hua's divine dragon? I don't know about any dragons, but if you're talking about Chung Myung, yeah, that's him. Seriously? Evil. What? Don't act so surprised. There's more where that came from. Wei Soheng gulped, fearing the chaos he had just stepped into. After freshening up, Chung Myung sat before the sect leader with a face that screamed, "Let's get this over with." So, not only do those Wudang wannabes attack our boys, but they called for backup from their main sect too? You're a disciple too, you know. Bruh, you just called them a bunch of bitches? What the hell? But, of course, Chung Myung didn't give a damn. So, they want help, huh? A serious glint flashed in his eyes as he stood up. Sect leader. Don't worry. I'll go whoop their asses, clean house, and be back before you even miss me. The room collectively flinched at his confidence. But Yoon Jong, who had seen it all, wasn't buying the act. How exactly are you planning to do that? How do you think? I'll run to Nanyang, crack some skulls, knock the Wudang flat on their asses, and burn their training hall down. That'll show them. Super efficient, right? That's a Taoist training hall, you idiot. What? Taoist halls don't burn. Everything burns, my guy. Even Mount Hua ain't fireproof. Why are you talking about burning Mount Hua? Why not? We might be next. You never know. Hinjong looked at Eungeum with a smile that said, "This is what I have to deal with daily. Can we really send him? We might want to reconsider." Yoonjong tugged on Chung Myung's sleeve. Dude, calm the hell down. Huh? But I am calm. Chung Myung blinked like he wasn't just plotting an arson. You said Hwayong Gate is the one paying us a ton of money, right? It's not just about the cash, bro. But sure, let's pretend that's all it is. The main branch protects those who pay their bills. Otherwise, what's the point of taking their money? Preach, my guy. We don't work for free. Hyun Young clapped. Everyone turned to him, and he sheepishly lowered his hands. Chung Myung puffed out his chest. Weren't they the ones who started it? Leave it to me. I'll go break their heads. Hyunjong smiled. Chung Myung. Yes, sect leader. Don't break their heads. How about their spines? I mean, don't seriously injure them. Yoon, Jung, show Wei Soheng to his room. He's probably hungry too. Yes, sect leader. I'll make sure he's well fed and comfortable. As they left, Hyunjong's face turned serious. Hyunsang. Yes, sect leader. Am I just being paranoid, or is there more to this Wudang mess? It's odd they'd pick a fight in Nanyang, where we haven't had trouble in ages. Hyunsang remained silent. Could it be a coincidence? Maybe, but something about it smelled fishy. I'm not sure sending Chung Myung is the right move, if they're targeting him. That's a stretch, right? It's Wudang. They've got no reason to start beef with us. What would they even gain? Well, Hyunjong sighed. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his gut. Since the last conference, Chung Myung's name has been on everyone's lips. He's overshadowed some of the top disciples in the world. Yes, they may not care about Nanyang, but they do care about who's climbing the ranks. So what? Eunjeom grinned. Sect leader, you know what the kids at Mount Hua call Chung Myung? Does he have a nickname? They call him Mount Hua's Mad Dog. Okay then. Am, who had been quietly listening, choked. Mad Dog's a bit rough, maybe? Blind dog? Still a dog. First a mad dog, now a blind one. What was next, a deaf dog? Well, anyway, anyone daring to mess with Mount Hua's divine dragon will soon find out why he's called that. Divine dragon? No. Mad dog. The sect leader turned to the group. Listen up. Mount Hua's name is on the rise again, and we can't leave our subsects hanging. Hwayong Gate has stood by us, so we'll make sure the world knows we don't abandon our own. The others nodded in unison. 2 years can change a lot, Hyunjong thought. It was time to show the world that Mount Hua was back, and this time they weren't playing around.